All right, let's just dive right in. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to unpack something I know literally every single IT department is wrestling with right now. Look, we know you're exhausted by the relentless hype cycle, so today we are throwing out the theory and looking at a highly pragmatic, entirely field-tested playbook for rolling out AI in the enterprise. This is drawn directly from the hard-won experience of Adeel Ali. He's a technology manager and IT systems architect based right in the Northern Virginia tech corridor. He has spent the last 2 years running point on AI rollouts in mid-sized enterprise environments, and he's outlined exactly what works, what absolutely does not, and what he really wishes he knew before he started the whole process.
You know, there's this massive issue brewing in enterprise IT right now, and this quote hits the nail on the head. The gap between what executives think AI will do and what actually ships into production keeps widening. I mean, it perfectly captures the intense pressure IT leaders are facing today in 2026. The vendor pitches are louder than they've ever been, and let's be honest, executive expectations are often completely unmoored from reality. If you're an IT manager, you've probably been cornered recently and asked, "So, what's our AI strategy?" And you need a real, grounded answer.
So, the absolutely crucial question is this. How do we actually cut through all that hype and successfully roll out AI? Like, how do we stop running these endlessly expensive experiments and start laying down actual, valuable infrastructure? Well, that's exactly what we're going to answer today. We are pivoting away from the sheer chaos of the AI marketplace and moving toward a structured, step-by-step roadmap.
To do that, we've broken down this chaotic topic into a highly structured, super easy-to-follow field guide. Here's our agenda for the Explainer. We'll start with the Enterprise AI reality, move into workflows in the 70% rule, talk about designing governance up front, managing vendors and lock-in, training staff for skepticism, and wrap up with the Virginia Advantage and beyond. Okay, Part 1, the Enterprise AI reality, leading with workflow. Let's tackle the very first major hurdle organizations face, which is the incredibly common mistake of leading with the shiny new tech instead of focusing on the actual work being done.
This breakdown brilliantly illustrates the divide between doing it wrong and doing it right. Buying Copilot licenses for the entire company, that's not an AI strategy. Actually, scratch that. As Adeel Ali points out, it's literally just a procurement decision. Buying licenses without studying the work is a fast track to failure. A true, disciplined AI strategy means getting in the trenches and observing actual workflows for 2 solid weeks, specifically to see if AI can remove friction.
Let's see how this builds into an actionable process. In Ali's last rollout, they picked 3 candidate workflows: sales proposals, IT ticket triage, and contract review. After observing them for 2 weeks, they applied the ultimate acid test. Pilot only if AI removes friction without adding new verification work. Out of those 3 candidates, 2 were great theoretical fits, but only one had a workflow simple enough that the AI didn't introduce more verification work than the time it saved. So they piloted that one and left the other 2 completely manual. And you know what? That isn't a failure. That is exactly what real IT discipline looks like. Moving right along to Part 2, workflows and the 70% rule, setting realistic expectations. Once you've finally found a workflow that actually makes sense, you've got to transition to the next critical phase, setting realistic expectations with your leadership team using a really powerful anchor metric.
So, here is the critical breakdown you absolutely have to understand. AI gets you to 70% of a deliverable. That's the big chunk. But that remaining 30%, oh boy, that is where all the risk lives. And that is exactly where human judgment and oversight are non-negotiable. You just cannot assume the AI will entirely replace a task from start to finish.
Listen, if your business case assumes AI replaces a task completely, you have already overpromised. But if you assume it cuts task time by, say, 60 to 70%, now you're in the realistic zone. You have to set this 70% expectation before deployment. Getting this rule out there early fixes those broken ROI models we're seeing everywhere right now. And honestly, more importantly, it prevents that dreaded, exasperating, but I thought it would do everything meeting with stakeholders 6 months into the deployment. We've all got scars from those meetings, right?
All right, Part 3, designing governance upfront, time to build the scaffolding. We need to completely reframe how we think about governance. It's not some annoying bureaucratic hurdle you deal with later on. It is an absolute prerequisite for success from day one.
If you try to treat AI governance as something you just kind of layer on after a rollout launches, you are in serious trouble. By the time users are trained, trying to retrofit access controls is a political fight you will absolutely lose. So you build this scaffolding beforehand. Here are the 4 essential pillars you need.
First, a data classification policy that defines exactly which data tiers can hit which model providers. Second, a 12-month audit trail tracking who used what model on what input. Third, a short, plain language acceptable use policy that every single user signs. And fourth, a model evaluation rubric. Basically, a simple framework to judge if the outputs are actually meeting quality thresholds. It isn't glamorous at all, I know, but it is exactly what separates a real AI program from a bunch of expensive, chaotic experiments. Part 4. Managing vendors and lock-in. Knowing the real costs. Let's introduce some of the hidden dangers lurking in the AI market. The hard truth is, the real cost of AI isn't the license fee you see on the sticker. The real cost is what happens when your workflows are entirely built around a specific vendor, and then they suddenly get acquired, or they change their terms, or they jack up their prices. Ali insists on 3 completely non-negotiable vendor tests before committing to anybody. And honestly, you should too. First up, data export. Can you extract everything you put in a highly usable format exactly when you demand it? Second, model substitutability. Does their integration let you swap underlying models without having to rewrite your entire workflow? And third, pricing transparency. Do they publish clear per token or per seat costs, or are you going to be trapped in a brutal renegotiation every single year? If a vendor fails even one of these tests, your rollout is going to end up being way more expensive than it looks on paper. Walk away. Section 5. Training staff for skepticism. Building sharp internal alarms. We've talked a lot about the technology and the vendors, but now we need to shift our focus to the end users. There is a massive flaw in how most organizations are conducting their AI training right now. See, most training focuses purely on what the tool can do, how to click the buttons. But that should only be half the battle. Your training needs to be a strict 50-50 split. 50% on how to use it, sure, but a vital 50% focused entirely on how to spot perfect-looking errors. Yes, the technology is genuinely useful, but it also confidently hallucinates citations and fabricates numbers in ways that look incredibly correct at first glance. Employees desperately need a sharper internal alarm for these fabrications. Showing them real-world examples where outputs looked completely flawless but contained really harmful errors, that is the half of the training that actually changes employee behavior for the better.
And finally, Section 6, the Virginia Advantage and Beyond, leveraging regional IT constraints. Let's zoom into a specific regional lens for a second to see how constraints can actually become your biggest advantages. We're looking at Northern Virginia, places like Falls Church, Fairfax, Loudoun, Arlington. This area is literally the data center capital of the world, and it has a very specific flavor of enterprise IT.
Because there is such a heavy federal contracting presence there, the workforce takes compliance incredibly seriously. But rather than seeing that as a burden, smart IT managers use it as real leverage. You can use strict requirements like FedRAMP and NIST 853 to force vendors to play on your terms. When vendors know they have to meet these rigid alignment requirements just to keep your business, they will negotiate. You have the power to insist on real foundational governance. Use it.
Looking ahead, here are 3 crucial 2026 trends from this explainer that mid-size enterprise tech managers need to be watching like a hawk. First, on-premise AI inference is finally becoming viable for sensitive workloads. The hardware economics shifted heavily in late 2025, which brings small model inference at the edge well within reach for a lot of budgets. Second, expect the NIST AI risk management framework to harden into very strict procurement requirements within the next 18 months. And third, there is an intense, massive pricing war going on among foundation model providers right now. In fact, if you signed a multi-year deal back in 2024, you are almost certainly overpaying in today's market. Seriously, go reevaluate those contracts tomorrow. I want to leave you with this really powerful concluding thought from Adeel Ali. AI is going to be infrastructure within 5 years. Right now, we are still learning how to lay the foundation. Think about that. The best IT managers, the ones you should respect the absolute most, aren't the ones running around with the flashiest AI demos. They are the ones who patiently say no to 4 bad ideas just to get one really good one perfectly right. If you're currently working through an AI rollout and you want to compare notes, you can continue the conversation directly with Adeel Ali at adeel-ali-virginia.card.co or just find him on Instagram at adeel_ali_Fairfax. Thank you so much for joining us on this explainer. As you head back to your own IT department today, I want you to ask yourself one question. Are you just pushing through procurement decisions to satisfy the executive hype cycle? Are you actually laying down the structural, highly secure foundation your enterprise needs to survive the next 5 years? Catch you next time.